members, Your Worship, and including yourself. Then we have external members, non-voting, Kiwi Rail. I think we have Angus with us today in Wellington. You're there somewhere, Angus? I think. Yes, you're there. And then we have external advisors. There's currently a vacancy for an environmental sustainability advisor. That was Glenn Crowther, now known as Councillor Crowther. We have a heavy freight advisor, we have a road safety advisor, and Inspector Logan Marsh is with us today. And we have a port advisor, Dan Kneebone, and the New Zealand Automobile Association representative is Stacey Spall. So, Your Worship, don't hesitate to pull us up at any stage. It's full of acronyms. I've asked the staff to spell everything out. But don't hesitate, please, to pull us up if there's something you'd like us to revisit or explain in much greater detail. I'm obligated to read the Chair's statement as per the public recording, in which I remind committee members and advisors that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making and encouraging openness and transparency. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments they've made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. As with all of my meetings, I invite all politicians to contribute. Don't hold back with any questions or queries that you want to put to staff or to presenters. But as we all know, and as I just explained to His Worship, we all know if the unlikely event of us having to take a vote, we know who is voting. So I'll explain that in due course. So I'm holding apologies. We did have one from Her Worship Leah Tapsell, but you're now on Zoom. Welcome, Your Worship. Good to have you with us. There's an apology from Doug Leader, the Chairman of the Regional Council, who's an ex officio member of this committee. Greg Pert, our heavy freight advisor, is an apology. And then Dan Kneebone from the Port. Are there any further apologies? Being none, I'll so move. Seconded the Honourable Ken Shirley. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Items not on the agenda, there are none. The order of business is pretty straightforward. We normally have a public forum, but today we have a deputation, and I'll explain the reasons for that. You will have received a wad of material from the equestrian associations up and down the country, and there's more to be handed out at some point. I took a captain's call and changed it to a deputation, knowing that I'm pretty sure out of the presentation you're going to resolve today to add your support to what is being requested by Julia on behalf of the New Zealand Equestrian Movement. So, Julia, you're there somewhere on Zoom down in Christchurch? Julia?
I sure am. I'm pressing the buttons. How are you all?
Good. Time-wise, we're looking at about 20 minutes. Do you hear the introduction as to who is here and who your audience is? So you're fully aware. As I said, this is a deputation from the New Zealand Equestrian Movement, and I'm pretty sure you're going to ask for some support from this esteemed group at the end of your presentation. So that's why it's a deputation and not a public forum, but we're looking at about 20 minutes. We're not going to get into arguments with you or debate any of these issues, but I can guarantee there'll be points of clarification because we do have a number of horse lovers around the table, don't we, Councillor McMillan? We do. We do. So, floor's yours. Go for it, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate the introduction. I hope you can hear me. I'm speaking to every regional transport committee across the country as part of getting consistent messaging out there, but also calling for your support by way of our journey to Parliament, where we are seeking an amendment to the Land Transport Act and Rulebook to formally recognise horse riders in this country as a vulnerable road user. I used to chair a road safety committee in the Huranui for 3 years, and contacts there, I have engaged with them, and Waka Kotahi were able to confirm for me that in this country, our transport literature does not include a formal definition of a vulnerable road user. And for me, that made absolute sense as to why horse riders across the country are treated so differently. There are really sad stories of engagement with respect to local government in terms of access and inclusion and pathways. And when I discovered that we are an other road user, and with that label, it means we're not included in road safety messaging or education, for me, that was an absolute gold nugget as to why there is just no formal, care wrapped around horse riders in this country. There is a two-prong approach to this campaign. One is about us rolling out our very own road safety messaging. And I can assure you the support from key stakeholders that are charged with, reducing trauma and death on our roads has been phenomenal. Today, we formally partner with New Zealand Police, and I will be releasing that to our community. And we've made up our own road safety targeted messaging for them to publicise. And it's because we've got an amazing network of riders within New Zealand who are your detectives. They are your sergeants. Every phone call I make to the trucking industry or AA or regional transport committees, there's horse riders everywhere. I don't even need to explain to some extent why I'm calling, because they get it. When I mention road safety on the roads, the degree of trauma and serious injury is nothing we can ignore anymore. You know that in this country there's a level of aggression. You know that there's a sense of entitlement. It goes hand in hand to what cyclists tell you, what walkers might tell you. And it is even scarier on an animal with a mind of its own, that we are doing our damn best to negotiate and get from A to B, but we require the assistance and support of motorists. And so we're releasing the Pass Wide and Slow campaign message. It's an international message, and it makes sense. Pass wide means 2 meters. Slow down. This applies for 100k zones to 50k zones. It's a simple message, but the cross reference to all vulnerable road users is really important, and that's why cyclist groups are standing with me now. And in terms of equestrian movement, Chair, you are correct. This started with 5 key organisations, the New Zealand Equestrian Advocacy Network being the one leading it, because these are the very people that engage with local councils, with decision makers, and are the ones on the ground that are feeling the dismissive attitude towards horse riders. So then the realisation that one organisation can't champion this, it needs to be a united approach. 31 equestrian groups and organisations stand in support of vulnerable road user status in this country. It's, I think, a first for the equestrian community to stand together, and I'm really, really proud. So with respect to Albert, we're rolling out Viz vests as of tomorrow, because 50 rides across the country are taking place. The weather doesn't help, but some are, going ahead as irrespective. And I guess that's illustrative of how strongly they feel about the messaging and taking ownership of their own safety. So we're rolling out Viz vests. We're engaging with the truck sector, and New Zealand Trucking Association wrote a brilliant letter just recently that will feature in their trucking magazine. And I sat with Dave Boyce on our road safety committee a number of years ago, and I always respected the fact that he came from a platform where, it's collective responsibility of road safety on our roads. And I've spoken to ProTrans, who put me up into the seat of the truck to show me the visibility that they do have. And one of his key sentences he said to me was, we are the safest on the roads, and so we have a responsibility to look after those who are most vulnerable. And so partnering with that mindset has moved us leaps and bounds. We've got zero budget to do this road safety, but we're doing it because the degree of near misses means we can't ignore it anymore. And Parliament, on the 15th of October, I'll be taking a petition. It closes on the 14th. My 12-year-old daughter, myself, and others will be joining me. I've written to every one of you guys, as well as politicians that wear a transport and local government hat. And I'm really pleased to tell you that I have cross-party political support for this. Winston Peters, Grant McCullum, Dana Kirkpatrick, Celia Wade-Brown would like to accept the petition on the 15th, and it will be formally lodged on that day. And I also have a change.org international petition running because I know the international horse community would like to support it. And that is because the vulnerable road user status is actually a worldwide issue. The UK Highway Code is leading in this space a long time ago, and just in 2002, they've made some more explicit messaging in their code whereby, pass wide and slow instead of just a picture of a horse on the side of the road. You need to have explicit messaging these days. And in May 2024, Victoria State released its findings from a road user inquiry concerned as to why their road toll wasn't going down post-COVID. And horse riders went into that not a VRU. They've come out as a recommendation to be a VRU. And some of those other recommendations are based around the UK Highway Code, where they have a vulnerable hierarchy. And, those who can cause the greatest harm have the biggest responsibility to look after. Also in Victoria State, speaking to the horse riders there, they said if they can get it through their government, then they have no doubt it will be rolled out across Australia. And so the Pass Wide and Slow movement, tomorrow and Sunday, we ride alongside other riders in South Africa, Australia, Canada, America, Ireland, and the UK. And we have their full support, and they're watching what we're doing here in New Zealand. And I also wanted to tell you that we're running a survey at the moment for near miss data because no authority captures this data. I also asked New Zealand Police for figures on the number of infringements and complaints that they receive from horse riders. And that request information came back this week. The number of infringements issued, which is a $55 fine, is pathetic. We're talking less than 10, and we're talking decades of information. With respect to, what else did I want to tell you? NZTA have accepted our offer to provide road safety messaging as well. And so we're just waiting on them to get back to us as to their specifications. But I think that is an illustration of how significant our legitimate request is to be captured in road safety and for our vulnerability to be acknowledged in legislation. I think that's all from me.
As I said, our heavy freight advisor is not here today, and I know he would have found this very interesting. And the NZTA are here listening to your presentation now. As I said, it's open to all politicians in the room. Questions or comments, anybody? Councillor McMillan.
Well, morning, Julia. Thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. I'm a horse rider myself, and I've experienced numerous near misses. I've had my stirrupines clipped a couple of times by cars. I've been beeped at, swerved at, revved at, shouted at. Those things are obviously far in the minority, and I think that, as you've highlighted, the biggest risk is people not realising the unpredictability of an animal. And there's no such thing as a bomb-proof horse. A bomb-proof horse is a rocking horse. Any other living horse is not bomb-proof, and so those that have the mindset of, well, you've got to keep your horse out of our way, horses aren't thinking like that. I've had similar experience. I'm also a cyclist, but obviously with a bike you can keep it straight, but if a horse is shying from, could be a plastic bag in the gutter on the curb, and the horse suddenly swerves out, that 2 metre rule is so significant. And I think there is, I've been in Aotearoa for 18, 19 years, and there was a marked difference I noticed from drivers in this country to the UK. So much so that eventually I gave up riding on the roads because I had that many near misses. So kia kaha with your campaign. I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I fully support what you're doing and wish you the best of luck.
Wish me a Daniel Western Bay of plenty, Julia.
Good morning, Julia, and thank you for your presentation. I just want to clarify what exactly you are seeking. I mean, the messaging sounds eminently sensible and wide and slow. Great support for that. Some of the other stuff, like wanting to be on shared paths, I can foresee other issues because pedestrians probably don't feel comfortable showing a narrow-ish path with a horse. And there might be other issues around there. And then speed of passing as well. If you've got 100 Ks, maybe this is more David's line of expertise, but if you've got 100 K zone and you have to slow down to 20, that will amount to a lot of braking. And I just want to perhaps understand your thoughts on those and what you're actually trying to achieve with this. Thank you.
Great questions. So with respect to the 20K, I'm not going down that path with respect to saying drivers need to slow down to 20. The pass wide and slow concept is a behavioural change. So the pass wide is 2 metres. The slow is slow down. Listen to the hand signals of your riders. They can see and feel what's going on around them that the motorist may not be aware of. So slow down 100 to a 60 or 80 to a 40 or 50 to a 20. It is, you know, up to interpretation. But the mindset that I come from is we can't even achieve 20 Ks in this country for school buses. So we're saying slow down. And it's the behavior and the understanding around a horse having a mind of its own and a rider doing their very best, but it takes a community to look after each other. With respect to shared pathway use, multi-use platform is something that I think this country really needs to come from with respect to investing in key infrastructure for off-road pathways. There needs to be a multi-use mindset, and then for very good reason as to why it can only be shared use. Shared use being, yeah, there's a long list of everyone who's shared use bar a horse rider. So, yeah, what we have also learned about, you know, what's happening around the country is there's some very good examples of multi-use happening. And when you have education, when you have permissions explicit, then people ride to those conditions. And my mindset is if I am on a track, you know, where I could see, you know, dog walkers and cyclists, you ride to that. The same goes for a cyclist and a woman pushing a pram. It can work. It does work around the world and is working in New Zealand. It's just about permission so that people understand what to expect on those certain trails.
Right, thank you.
Oh, sorry, you wish to go?
No, I was just finishing. That's right. I just noticed in the UK you have separate routes called bridleways and so on. So there is a bit of differentiation there, but it equally does vary. There's shared paths in central London with horse paths, and they have special pedestrian crossing buttons which are higher up for horses, and they cater for them quite well there in certain places like Hyde Park. So yeah, without trying to make a really bad pun, I guess horses for courses and but again, yeah, I think you're right. It's about education and what to expect, but maybe not every single shared path. Yeah.
Yeah, and for an example, there's the South Trails Trust here in Timaru to Tekapo that's building with public money, taxpayer money, ratepayer money, a infrastructure that is off-road and it's exclusive. It doesn't include horse riders, whereby what an amazing multi-use pathway that could be. And horses actually don't require the lime chip compacted surface. We only need a bit of dirt on the side. And remember, we can go over and under things quite nicely. So it's just about that understanding of inclusion as opposed to a blanket ruling of no.
Thank you, Julia.
Geordie, you got two more questions. One's the Honourable Ken Shirley from the Regional Council, and then David Spears from NZTA, and then I'll wrap this up because I know that the Honourable Ken Shirley's got a resolution to put to us. So, Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the submission, Julie. Certainly a very important issue. My understanding of the legislation is that horses are permitted to use any roadway other than an expressway. They can actually go on a motorway, which probably isn't advisable. But your request to make a provision, which is not provided, my understanding of the law, there's no provision for vulnerable road uses at the moment in the legislation. To my mind, horses would have to be a subset because you've got e-scooters, pedestrians, and all the other multi-users that we know. It would be wrong to just classify one because there's a whole range of vulnerable road users with different needs and categories. So my question, I guess, to you is, would you accept that it is a subset of vulnerable users with a whole lot of others? And I noticed from your literature that you're actually, it's not just horse riders, it's horse riders and carriage drivers, which raises an interesting point because in a number of jurisdictions, donkeys and mules pull carts, and a lot of freight tasks is done actually by donkeys and mules. So would we extend it to include that? And you can see where I'm going. It actually gets quite complex in itself. But you make the point well. I think there is a need to recognise vulnerable road users, particularly with the moving technology. Not too far back when all transport was by horses, so we do need to recognise that and make provision for it. But I guess my question is, do you accept that it is a subset of a much greater issue with relating to vulnerable road users?
I look to the European Commission and I look to the UK Highway Code by way of a definition of a vulnerable road user. And it's everything from a road worker to a horse rider to a scooter to a skateboarder to a cyclist and a pedestrian. So that for me is fact. How that's interpreted in this country as to provision of off-road pathways, that is a discussion down the line, but you cannot take away the fact that we are vulnerable road users. And with respect to carriage drivers, they are too. So what flows out from that status, I'm not willing to go there right now, but it's the formal recognition of our vulnerability and looking to international definitions to guide us is what I'm focused on.
Probably the next question is David Spears, and David represents NZTA and is a voting member of this committee based in Hamilton. David.
Kia ora, Julia. So I heard your presentation at Waikato Regional Transport Committee. My question comes as a consequence of that and a conversation that I had afterwards with a few of the members who didn't get to ask you questions. Is there an expectation or an acceptance that with recognition will also come inevitably a form of regulation around use? So, for example, I think about the carriage, horse and carriage, not suggesting that that should be categorised as a heavy vehicle or anything, but almost inevitably with that recognition is going to flow some sort of regulation that says, that's great, we accept that you're a vulnerable user, but if you've got a couple of draft horses and a carriage that's 2.5 metres wide and you're driving down a 100k stretch of road with a few blind corners, that's just an accident waiting to happen. There may well have to be some consideration that says, well, actually, you're not acceptable on this kind of a road. I'm curious about whether your members have thought about that and also whether there is some sort of, I don't know, hesitate to use the word industry, but some sort of guideline out there for folks to say, you know what, these kind of places, it's just not sensible to put an animal travelling at 30 kilometres an hour or 10 kilometres an hour. These places, it makes a lot of sense. The expressway example brings up, Is that something that's been contemplated?
No, absolutely not, because I guess look at the current state of play. They're doing it anyway, and the big group of carriage drivers, I don't think is fair to pull them into this conversation, because I'm speaking on behalf of 40,000 plus horse riders. The carriage driving sector is relatively small, and by including carriage drivers, the thought process is, there's a woman that tootles around with her little carriage and pony on wide grass verges in Blenheim. It's her safety that I'm thinking about. It's my friend Corey, who's training some Clydes in Selwyn on the grass verges, and it's those people, those ones that have the huge carriages that are going down the Danzies past and things like that. They're doing it already. I don't think, I'm not going to be frightened off by a regulation being thrown at me. It really needs to be common sense and practicality and legislation that's fit for purpose, because the current state of play as an other road user is putting lives at risk. And I think we must focus on that.
Yeah, I take your point. I guess the question that I was asked afterwards was common sense cuts both ways, and is there an acceptance that there would be some sort of control placed on those users? That's simply the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate that. But like everything, and local government is damn good at it, we can do a submission process as we go down the line and a select committee process to discuss all those things. But right now, I'm bringing the issue to your table and seeking support for our legitimate case to be seen as a vulnerable road user in this country.
Thanks, Julia. Any further questions or comments, colleagues, before I pass over to the Honourable Ken Shirley? Councillor Shirley.
Well, thank you, Chairman. On the basis of that, I'd like to move the motion that this Regional Transport Committee thanks Julia McLean for her submission and delegates authority to the Chair to review and sign a letter to the Minister of Transport in support of recognising horse riders as vulnerable road users.
Is there a second? Mayor Luke, are you happy to second that as a great horse rider yourself?
I've got 250 horses.
Do you?
Yeah, under the bonnet.
Oh,
Are you happy to second? Okay,
Someone
it's been moved and seconded. Any further speakers? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There you go, Julia. All the best with your campaign. You got the vote.
Thank you very much, team. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I will share this with the equestrian community, which is Equestrian Sport New Zealand, RDA, Pony Club New Zealand, Te Hapere Hoiho, New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, Polo. You think it, they're on board. So this means a lot. Thank you so much.
Just tell them to vote for us. That's all you got to do. Okay, you have a good day, Julia.
Thank you.
Okay, there are no declarations of conflicts of interest. Page 8 of the minutes of our last meeting on the 22nd of May. His Worship Mayor Moore and David Spears, you happy to move those as a reasonably true and accurate record of that meeting? Aye. Aye. All good. Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I presume there were no matters rising from those minutes that might come up in the course of today's meeting. Over to the chairperson's report, everyone, on page 17. Over to Oliver, and there's a reference in here to State Highway 2, which I will get the Honourable Ken Shirley and his Worship Mayor Denia to speak to, but floor's yours, Oliver, go for it.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Members, the chairperson's report brings to light matters of potential interest to the committee. We will start with the announcements around the National Land Transport Programme. So this is in effect the outcome of the Regional Land Transport Plan process, which this committee has been through over the past 18 months. Staff have tabled a briefing note which summarises the outcomes from the submission of the RLTP. I appreciate that members won't have had a lot of time to consider the aspects within that briefing note, but it broadly summarises NZTA's formal response to us, which is presented in a letter, which I understand is also on the table in front of you. Focusing on key outcomes for the region and priority projects that were noted in the Regional Land Transport Plan. Tauranga had Welcome Bay Road, Tote Road, 15th Avenue upgrades funded. NZTA stages 1, 2 and 3 of State Highway 2929A and NZTA Takatimu North Link stage 1 revocation. Western Bay, confirmation of continued funding for Takatimu North Link stage 1 and confirmation of funding for stage 2. Eastern Bay, the Opposing Resilience project was funded. And for public transport, confirmation that the National Ticketing Solution NTS under the brand name Motu Move will be funded for the Bay of Plenty. I'm conscious that members might have some reflections on their individual programmes, so would invite any comments or questions on matters pertaining to the NLTF at this point.
Going to discuss this a little bit further on in the meeting too, aren't we?
So, Chair.
Want to do it now? Okay. Questions or comments to Paul? Councillor McMillan.
Just with the public transport situation, will we at some point, I know it's not necessarily for this forum, but get a breakdown of what the impacts of that are going to be?
Through you, Chair, so we'll be bringing some public transport focused analysis to the Public Transport Committee, which is meeting a week next Tuesday. I can speak at a high level, so staff have undertaken some initial analysis which has shown that there is sufficient funding to maintain current levels of service across the region, but there is limited funding for improvement activities in the public transport space. But we will bring further detail to the Public Transport Committee.
Thank you.
Questions to Oliver? None. Honourable Ken Shirley, do you want to speak about the item on page 20, 2.3, and then we'll lead in then from you to His Worship Mayor Denia.
Thank you, Chairman. As members of the committee are aware, there's a lot of concern with the installation of the wire barriers, median barriers between Katikati and Omokoroa, particularly those roads that weren't serviced by roundabouts. They virtually were precluded from having a right-hand turn, which required them to head considerable distances in the wrong direction and upset community connectivity. And there's a very tense situation. Very active community groups of concern were discussing the matter with NZTA. A public meeting was called in Katikati some 2 months back, and it was standing room only, over 350 people there, as I recall. I've been asked to chair that meeting. There was a unanimous resolution passed from that meeting, and that was that the public meeting requested that the Road Transport Committee, jointly or supported by the Western Bay District Council, write to the board of NZTA asking that right-hand turn onto the State Highway 2 be provided in all lateral roads between Omokoroa and Katikati. A very good letter was written, signed by our chairman and Mayor Denia, and the NZTA board considered that, and no doubt David Spears could give us greater insight into that. And we have got the correspondence attached to our agenda of what that decision was. I don't think the local people are entirely satisfied in that not all of the lateral roads are provided with right-hand turns. NZTA has agreed, my understanding is, not to continue further installation of wire barriers. And I should make the point, the local people there certainly welcome and recognise the incredible safety improvements that have been made in that stretch of highway. It's just that trade-off between what some would see as extreme road safety requirements, and there's always a trade-off with that, versus connectivity and functionality, and the economic costs of not being able to service the orchards and emergency service and a whole lot of other issues associated with no right-hand turns became quite severe. So I guess what we have is a compromised appeasement to an extent, and I think my feeling, or the local feeling, is that yes, they're very happy that it won't be an absolute situation, but there is ongoing concern that there are some very significant side roads with substantial communities up them that still will not be able to undertake right-hand turns and will be suffer or subject to considerable inconvenience and economic cost.
Colleagues, the reason for the urgency for the letter was that a couple of days after the meeting that Honourable Ken Shirley's referred to, there was a meeting of the NZTA board in Wellington, chaired by the new chairperson, Honourable Simon Bridges, and we had to catch that particular meeting. And I don't know if you can share with us, David, but I know there was a considerable amount of time that the meeting spent discussing safety improvements, Waihito and Mukaroa. So is Worship near Daniel? Do you want to fill in some gaps?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just following on from what Honourable Ken Shirley was saying, the residents remain deeply angry about the barrier remaining across White Road, and I would have to say that the anger is growing rather than dissipating. But I am hopeful that this can be resolved one way or another. White Road is the last major side road. There's two more, I think it is, and they're pretty minor. Although I recognise or acknowledge the feelings of the residents on that road, on those roads, but White Road is the key one, with probably close to 1,000 residents up there, sort of in the hundreds anyway. I also feel that abandoning the programme completely is a wasted opportunity. Certain sections like the Arbiter Curves have historically been a highly lethal section of road, and with no side roads or driveways to speak of, it could have median barrier installed with little or no controversy and prevent loss of life. For those who've driven that road, that has been an issue for a long time. So I do feel it's a shame that babies being thrown out with the bathwater, but also, and also not sorting. White Road residents are still unhappy with what they've been landed with. So I'll be advocating for that road to be have right turns.
Thank you, Your Worship. Back to you, Oliver. If you can lead into the Regional Road Safety and Ridership Education Promotion Update as part of the Chairman's report.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, the last item to bring to the awareness of members. So most of you will be aware that for over a decade, the Regional Council has delivered a road safety promotion programme focused on a variety of methods to address road safety behaviour through education and awareness initiatives. This is in addition to the national campaigns, but also the activities undertaken by individual TLAs. Because of the amount of good work going on in this space, it is challenging to ascertain the benefits that the Regional Road Safety Programme adds to this space. And given the constrained funding environment, the Regional Council made a decision not to fund the Regional Road Safety Programme going forwards. However, staff will still support the sub-regional activities delivered by TLAs in terms of staff time, and will still report the progress at a TLA level to this committee. Just be that the Regional Council will not be funding that regional programme. So just to bring your attention to the update report that is appended to the chair's report. So you'll see that there are a number of activities that have been delivered across the region over the past quarter. So those are motorbike campaigns around basic handling. We've had a youth play in Whakatane to raise awareness of behaviours and driving habits, cycle safety training at various locations across the region, as well as a number of car seat clinics, again, across the region. Happy to take any questions on that item.
Questions or comments to Oliver? There being none, I will move receipt of the chairman's report, seeing the resolution there to me. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. With your indulgence, David, Oliver has a fear that he's going to be called away to an urgent call at 11:15. So can I just take a couple of seconds for you all to move over to item 7.4, and we'll deal with this prior to morning tea arriving. The proposed Upper North Island Strategic Alliance position paper. So if you can all just Google that up, 7.4. Leaving this, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay, floor's yours.
Hello everyone, Andrew Williams, Transport Plan Manager at Barclay Regional Council. It's nice to be here again today, and warm welcome to Mayor Drysdale. So the next position paper, which is item 7.4, yep. So I'll take the paper as all get read, and note that the paper is information only, so no decisions are required today. Secondly, the paper provides an update on the status of the development of the proposed UNESA position paper on national significance of a resilient and efficient Upper North Island supply chain. Apologies. At this early stage, staff believe the position paper requires further balance from across the UNESA partners, and some specific additions will be promoted by staff. I was also contacted by Kiwi Rail with respect to their position on the UNESA statement, and we will be communicating with them. This committee will have the opportunity to review the statement or the position paper, when it is in its drafts. So at the moment it's simply in development and hasn't been exposed to the committee yet. Happy to take questions.
Questions to Andrew's colleagues? His worship there, Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to speak in support of Andrew's comments and staff position. It seems to be entirely focused on Auckland and north thereof. So, and I think that also partly represents the membership. And I see it's regional councils and metros, but also I see Whangarei is in there. And obviously with the hiatus with Tauranga, that I guess there's probably not been a lot of representation from councils further down this way. So I would support having a little bit more focus on where we are, and would be happy to provide input if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a bit cynical about this, actually. There's been numerous very detailed, in-depth studies on this very topic by NZTA, Ministry of Transport, Kiwi Rail have been involved, the freight industry's been involved, port companies. It's been thoroughly analysed and reported on. This seems to be an initiative of sort of local government thinking, oh, we'll reinvent the wheel and do our own one. And it seems to have been captured by the northern interest, with particularly around the Marsden Point proposals and around that. So I just question myself, a lot of cost and time, council staff doing this work, and it's all there. Ministry of Transport's just overflowing with these reports of the Upper North Island freight needs. AA have been involved too. Sorry, Stacey, I admit that every interested party has been involved in detailed studies on this topic, and here's local government spending time and money reinventing the wheel. I just don't get it.
Further speakers? Being none, there are recommendations on the bottom of page 42, 3 of them going over to 43. I'm happy to move. You happy to second, your worship? It's been moved and seconded. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say. John, can you hear me? John, can you hear me? Scrimmager. Yes, audio's off, but just join in.
Yes, I can.
Feel free to ask questions if you so wish.
Thank you.
Hey, David. Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The floor's yours. It's your last
It
time on
is.
stage, so take as long as you like. And I know if their worship's here, and I know his worship Mayor Luca wish to seek some clarification from NZTA as the process goes forward. So over to you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take the report as read. I have got a presentation here that takes us substantially through the report anyway. And I just acknowledge that Oliver's paper around the NLTP and the copy that you all provided of the letter that Oliver got from our minister around the NLTP. And in the back is a comprehensive table with all of the what was asked for versus what was funded. In addition, just acknowledge before I get lots of detailed questions, we have booked meetings with, I think, all of you, or your organisations, to sit down at a staff level and work through the detail of what's in the NLTP, particularly in the low cost, low risk space, but also in some of the other investment areas where there's literally just a number without the detail of projects. And that's happening in the next 2 or 3 weeks, appreciating that we didn't get the final NLTP until the day before you all did. So while we were absorbing it and trying to send out messages to you all, we are still to some extent absorbing what has or hasn't landed in our own space as well as in your spaces. So over the next 2 or 3 weeks, our investment advisors and teams will be sitting down to have that more detailed conversation, particularly in terms of continuous programs and areas where I know some of you have made investment decisions in advance of the NLTP, and just working out how we manage that. So first slide is in fact about NLTP with that.
So David, just pausing for a moment, are you happy to take questions through this?
As always,
As always.
questions as they come.
So it's open to the whole floor, everyone here and those on the screen. So just put your hand up and we'll get David to answer the questions.
So very quickly, highlights from the NLTP outcome, 32.9 billion across the next 3 years across the whole transport program. That's a new record level of investment. Substantially that's driven by investment in the roads of national significance, the roads of regional significance, and pretty large investment in public transport, albeit that is focused in Wellington, Auckland and Christchurch and around the national ticketing system, but still substantial.
David, just pause one moment. His Worship Mayor Luca.
Just want to get a handle on it. 32.9 billion is a big number or a small number. The population is increasing. Is that indexed for inflation? I mean, in real terms, and normalised by inflation over time, is that really substantially more than?
It's a bigger number than we've ever had before. Indexed against inflation, effectively in some investment areas it's less than what we've had previously, and in others it's more because we've shifted the financing around. But yeah, look, it is
normalised by population, because if I divided every number by population, would I actually be bigger or not? Because that's the important thing.
well, I don't know if it is the important thing. It's a debate we could have for half an hour or an hour about.
I'm just wondering if the data exists, and if you could.
No, it
send
doesn't.
to me.
It doesn't exist.
That's handy.
Not handily. But this gets us into government have made decisions about where to deploy the money. They've deployed more in some areas and less in other areas. National Land Transport Program's got more than it's ever had. Is that indexed against population growth? Is it indexed against? No, that's not no. And that's not the decision process that was followed for this investment.
I guess what I'm saying is you put a number there that looks big, but I don't know if it really is big.
Yeah, I think one of the things to bear in mind also is that it is a big number in the context of the market and our ability to deliver. So there will be challenges for us, particularly in the roads of national significance and in the maintenance and operations space for us and yourselves in terms of deliverability, just because we've had a period of time where that delivery market probably hasn't invested as much as it would have to get up to speed. So we're going to have one of the things we've said, I think quite openly, is we're going to have a bit of a lag in terms of the first couple of years of this investment.
Well, perhaps you can point me to where I can get the actual billions spent per year over the last 4 decades. If I could have that, then I could do my own numbers. That'd be great.
Yep, we can give you that.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure we can give you that without too much trouble. Just in terms of some of the more specifics, for 24-27, 4.6 billion in state highway maintenance and local roads with local government, 5.5 billion to do the pothole fix, with some new targets around responsiveness around managing potholes. Now, the pothole fix is not just targeting potholes. This is about rehab, surface rehabs and things across the whole network. And you'll all be aware that at the moment, or as of a few days ago, actually, we have started a new way of delivery on State Highway 1, where we're closing the entire State Highway 1 from Tito to Tararoo. That is part of that 5.5 billion program. The aim there is that by closing it, we reduce traffic management costs significantly. We can rehab the entire piece of that network, including, road signs, the whole lot, all at once, and we can work, much longer days without having contraflow traffic and things. It's a bit of I won't say it's an experiment, it's a trial of how we're going to work in that space, assuming it's successful, and thus far the indications are that it's going quite well. we'll keep progressing all the way to Waihuru over the next 18 months with that program. So various sections of state highway closing. We'll then transfer that to some of the other state highway networks and continue that program. 1.7 billion for road safety promotion, road policing. Vast majority of that is around road policing, although I'll acknowledge that I'm sure road policing, I'm sure my colleague at the end of the row here will say, we could spend a lot more in that space. 6.4 billion for public transport, mostly focused on Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, and the national ticketing system, but also continuing existing programs. There's not a lot in there for new programs and new infrastructure investment. Delivering the roads of national significance, and I've got a slide with a bit more detail here in a minute, and a real press from the GPS and the Minister's letter of expectations, and actually that's copied in the letter that Oliver provided you, a real expectation around a no-frills approach, value for money, and looking at alternative funding sources across the whole program, which is something that we're turning
David,
on.
just pause on that. Is worship there, look at?
David, 1.7 billion for much of which is road policing. Do we know what the income, because it generates income, right? Or not? Fines.
Well, those are reinvested back into the system. Yes, it does.
I just wondered to what extent it's offset, that's all.
It doesn't include the offset. I think the key thing there is the offset is not something that we bank or have an expectation that you'll earn X revenue. The targets and are more about you will do this many stops and breath tests and etc., as opposed to you'll make this much money. But obviously the tickets come with an income. Of course they do.
David, just pause a moment. I never ever thought I'd have to say this. Councillor Crowd.
That's why I had to ask a question. I had to stop making a liar for
Congratulations.
for 5 years. Thank you. Just a quick question through the chair. The funding for public transport services, which I think is 3.7 billion of the 6.4, the rest being infrastructure. So people have said in the last few days about the national ticketing service, like you've said, and that's about 100 million. Yeah, but I'm more interested in how much of the increase in funding is due to cover the costs of increased services over that, sort of the inflation effects or whatever.
Yes, there is an acknowledgement in that funding of the increased cost of providing the services. So that is not going to buy lots of new services. I think that's a really important acknowledgement.
Yeah, if I may, it'd be quite helpful, I think, to tease out, not just for this committee, but for, I guess, elected members on other transport committees, to tease out what we're actually talking about, because the national ticketing thing is not actually that big a chunk of money in the scheme of things. The bigger chunk seems to be the cost escalation around it, and I guess it'd be helpful to understand how much has been provided for to cover for those costs and how much will have to be sort of.
Yeah, so I don't have that detail to hand, but there is an absolute acknowledgement that a lot of that investment is existing continuous programs and escalation of costs, and there is an expectation in the Minister's letter that, for example, fare revenue will rise in order to address some of that, and that other funding sources will be sought as well as part of addressing that. So yeah, absolutely. I'll see if we can rustle that up. So in the Bay of Plenty, that breaks down to an investment of 1.9 billion. The breakdown's up on the screen there for you. Again, modest levels of investment in safety, public transport, walking and cycling, relative to what the ask was through the transport plan. Reasonably significant levels of investment, notwithstanding Luca's point around maintenance operations and the pothole investment. So you'll see a lot of activity in the next 3 years on the network, doing that work both on local roads and state highways. So the roads of national significance, as I said, a substantial portion of the investment is targeted at roads of national significance. We are at the moment out consulting on tolling as one of the revenue sources that the government have asked us to have a good look at. It's a statutory requirement that when we build new road, we do that anyway, but I would say there's particular focus in this GPS and NLTP on those alternative sources of funding, not just tolling. You'll also be aware that we're coming, and I actually put a slide on in a minute about time of use charging and call it congestion charging if you want to, and other revenue sources. There's a very strong expectation that that will be something that both the NZTA and local authorities explore. There's a very real level of pressure to get spades in the ground in the next 3 years on some of those roads of national significance, including the ones in the Bay of Plenty. And the aim really with the 10-year construction pipeline by announcing all of those is to give industry a decent sort of view of what the pipeline is so that they can tool up, so to speak, to get themselves ready for delivery of some of the roads of national significance that will be delivered a little bit later in the program. So just by way of confirmation, if you like, the roads of national significance that are relevant to us, I've included the Waikato ones in the next slide, simply because I think Waikato and Bay of Plenty increasingly, we need to invest in both. They are spread across the country. The vast majority of the investment in the northern part of the North Island, but still quite significant investment across the rest of the country. Specifically in the Waikato and Bay of Plenty, so starting with the Manawa Bridge replacement, which if you are driving that piece of road at the moment, you'll see the surveyors out there doing geotech at the moment for the future alignment of the new Manawa Bridge. Just noting that bridge will be future-proofed for 4-lane. It won't be built with 4 lanes, but it will be built in a way that future-proofs it to be 4-laned ultimately. And the simple reason for that is the demand for 4 lanes is not there at the moment. If we built 4 lanes, what we'd be doing is building ourselves a liability of maintenance for a bridge which doesn't need to be that large. But acknowledging that, in the future there's every potential that it will be the foundation work and what have you will be done for a 4-lane.
David, just pause a moment, just wish it there, Luca.
Just a moment, the curiosity, what's the span, and is it a single span, or will it have pillars, i.e. is it resilient, resilient?
Yes, it's been built with flood resilience in mind. I don't know what the span is though. I can't tell you that level of detail.
So it will have a single span, or it will still have pillars?
I think the intention is that it will have head walls at each side, much the same as the one that there is there now, but it won't have a centre pillar.
Cost?
Still being worked on, because the final design work hasn't been done yet.
Not just because the pocket money.
No. So and also it will be built on the future Stateway 29 Tauriko West alignment. So again, future proofing for that project. As I say, detailed design supplier has been shortlisted, but the detailed design hasn't been done yet. Next one. So Takitimu North Link Stage 2 is confirmed. We are aiming to lodge consents with Regional Council, District Council, etc. Late this year. And we're still working on what the detailed construction timeframes would be. Ideally, we would time it to coincide very closely with the completion of Stage 1 for obvious reasons, a lot of efficiencies that go with that. But some of that depends on how we go with the remaining property purchase designation and consenting.
David, just pause a moment, just worship there, Daniel.
Can I ask, are those consents, are they going to go through the fast track process?
Coming to that in a moment. The short answer is yes. Well, we've applied, so it's not a given that will be the case. Kavisha Pireri, so obviously relevant for the start of the world for obvious reasons. The picture there is the State Highway 129 roundabout, by the way. The consent package for that is expected to be lodged in the fast track legislation in 2024, so the end of 2024. Again, we're well on track for that. And it's a significant piece of infrastructure, so we'll be delivering it in stages as we go. That said, the first stage is already underway because the State Highway 129 roundabout in the picture has got an extra arm on it for obviously to connect to Cambridge and Beauty. So as you can see there, that's already got asphalt down. Theory, it's almost drivable now, and we will be starting to divert traffic onto parts of it in the next couple of months. Hamilton Southern Links, perhaps less of an issue for this committee, but notwithstanding, that's also been announced for work. The first bit of work there is to do the investment business case, and we're on that already, but we expect to finish that in mid-2025, early 2025. There's no construction money in the CNLTP for that, so this is one of those later pipeline ones. But that includes State Highway 21 and State Highway 3, including a new bridge across the Waikato River as part of the State Highway 21 investment. So
David, just pause for a minute. Is worship near Drysdale?
Hi, and thank you. Yeah, just had a quick question. Obviously, a lot going on, and what is the sector capacity, and are we going to start driving prices up by competing with each other when we're doing all this maintenance because we just don't have that capacity?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and one that was considered in a fair bit of detail when we were looking at both the maintenance and operations investment and these large roads of national significance. And it's part of the reason why they are staged across a 10-year period for starting. We sat down with the key industry players, tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3, and had sort of that very conversation. And the truth is, in terms of delivery, they do not have the capacity to deliver everything now or in the next 3 years. They need that lead-in time to tool up, so to speak. And that's part of the reason, for example, why we're doing the acceleration program on State Highway 1, because we had existing capacity and willingness in the contractor pool to have a go at that acceleration program on a small scale. Well, small scale at State Highway 1, but on a stage scale, with the expectation that build-up would occur in the next 3 years. There's also a slide a little bit later talking about our IDM, the change away from the not contracts to a different contracting model for maintenance and operations. And again, that's an acknowledgement that we need to start spreading our investment into the tier 2 and tier 3 contractors in order to enable them to have a pipeline of growth. So to your point, Mayor Drysdale, we are very cognizant of that, and we have had and are continuing to work with the sector in that space, because the last thing we want to do is create a scarcity situation that drives prices up or worse, fails to deliver.
Just a quick one though. How many tier 1 contractors do we have? 5?
Roughly 5, 4.5, 5.
In the whole country, so I guess there's not a lot of competition.
So I guess following from that, was it not an oligopoly, it's a pentagopoly, I suppose. What is the capacity to encourage more tier 2 to actually grow, and so that you've got greater competition on that top level?
Yeah, so there is capacity. So this IDM, so the integrated delivery model, that is, we are now replacing our network outcome contract model with, so those of you that have been around for a while, you know that we have in different parts of the country a contract with one or more of the large contractors and some of the tier 2s to manage the state highway network on our behalf in terms of maintenance and renewals and things. That's worked really well up until now. We're now on it. Well, it worked really well for a while. It hasn't worked that well for us in recent years, and we've acknowledged that, and we're now changing to this integrated delivery model, which is much more about targeting the work we contract to the large contractors, to the things that only they can deliver, and reserving the ability to direct contract the smaller, less complex work to tier 2 and tier 3 contractors. The view being that there's more than enough work with this level of investment, I think, to the point about pipeline, for the large contractors to continue to be viable, and to enable the smaller contractors to come and be part of that with a direct relationship with NZTA as opposed to through a third-party relationship. So that's our strategy about how do we grow that capability, but not really us growing the capability, it's us giving investment certainty to those contractors so that they can start to invest in their own capacity. So we've been working on that at the moment. We've put out a request for information across the whole market to say who's keen and what capacity do you have and what capacity could you bring to the table. We've given a description of the nature of work that we would require so that we can get good information from those contractors to say we're capable of delivering this. This is the area we want to deliver it in. And then we will move to the next phase of that procurement process. So we've been very deliberate about it, with that aim that what we're doing is growing the pipeline in New Zealand and growing the capability base. Still a bit of work to go there, but it does hopefully help address that issue. TTM, I just put this in there because I know that your organisations will all be grappling with this. So from the end of October, we will shift away from COPTM to the new Temporary Traffic Management, New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management as the technical standard. In essence, what that does is it says there are still some standards, but there is a lot more discretion about how you will manage temporary traffic management to meet those requirements. The intent being that that will drive cost savings, it will drive more efficiency, and a less compliance-based approach to temporary traffic management. It's not a relaxation of the standards, it's more a case of saying horses for courses, you can, that's the second time we've had that today. You can apply this at your discretion. However, it doesn't take away the accountability for that decision. So you're still accountable for the decisions you make.
David just paused his worship there, Luca, or were you just scratching your nose?
Sorry to be a nuisance, but at an LGNZ conference, it was stated, not a conference, at a quartet or an online one, it was stated that about 50% of the cost of building a road is road safety management. Is that correct?
Not as a single number. It's really variable, so it can vary.
On average?
No, on average it's much less than that, but it is still more than 10%, less than 50%. See, 20 to 30% can be for a complex road environment.
And I just wonder how well, if that has a good rationale behind it, that I presume that number has escalated over time. So you would expect to see a decrease in fatalities during road construction or something?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, are we just doing things because it's somebody's project and so therefore we should drive it? Because 30%, 50%, whatever, it's a hell of a lot of money to build a bloody road. I mean, we didn't build this country that way. We only had, 1960 only had 2 million of population, and yet most of the roads in my district are the same ones that were there in 1960.
Yeah.
So we've got a problem somewhere. But anyway, you're just the messenger, so and
yeah. Look, and part of the move towards this this new approach around the New Zealand Guide is to provide for more pragmatism, if you like, in terms of, so rather than you shall do this just because you shall do this. There's a move to more pragmatism, but not a move away from accountability for that pragmatism. So, ultimately, it's still a choice to use. I drove past a couple of chaps the other day changing a light bulb in a stop sign. there were two of them. They had a ute on the side of the road with a flashing light, and they had a ladder propped up and tethered to the light, to the stoplight, and two road cones. And this was on River Road in Hamilton, which is an incredibly busy, River Road and Wairiri Road intersection, which is an incredibly busy intersection. Nothing about that seemed unsafe, but it was a very pragmatic, very minimalist approach to their health, safety and wellbeing. And I don't think they were any less safe than the average pedestrian standing at that intersection waiting to cross the road. So, you know, also, pragmatism has its place.
I mean, we tend to lose some perspectives on what kills people in this country, how much money we spend. You know, I mean.
Yeah, and look, this again, the key thing here is this is about keeping not just the people driving their cars, but the people working on the road safe. And part of the reason, for example, we've gone with the acceleration program on State Highway 1 and being able to close the entire network is if you're working on State Highway 1, and my son does in his Christmas holidays for swaps, and there are cars ripping past, let's face it, they don't go 30 k's an hour through those work sites, they go 55, 60. One of them clips a road cone, those road cones weigh 8 kilograms, one of them hits you in the back, you're in big trouble. So it's about how do we make that safer? And for us, the decision on the acceleration program was if we just close that section of State Highway, the risk's gone. And the cost, the substantial cost is gone. So, pragmatism.
Just pause a minute, David. Councillor McMillan.
Oh, you partially answered my question just there, David, but it was about the closing roads thing, because I suppose I do sometimes see situations that I wonder why hasn't that road just been closed and diverted. For example, a classic one is that Welcome Bay roundabout that's just recently been finished, when there was a route to divert traffic round it, and it took, I think, about 4 months to build one roundabout. And I'm thinking, if they'd closed that road, obviously I'm not an expert, but built into this efficiency and safety, pragmatism, are there going to be more situations like the State Highway 1 method of just shut the road, divert it, get the job done, everyone's safe, no one's managing traffic because the road's shut?
I think so. The answer to that is yes. So there's an example up there from Luca. The second bullet point: 3-week closure on Wellington State Highway motorway saved $154,000 on traffic management. So there are real savings. The key thing in those situations is where we close, for example, a state highway and put traffic onto a local road. There is an impact and there is a cost to that local road. So suddenly you put 10,000 cars a day on a local road that normally has 1,000 cars a day. Yeah. There's a massive impact on that local road, and that comes at a cost. So there's a balance there, often, as to whether that local road will cope and what the cost of rehabbing that local road after the job is. So there are trade-offs, but where those, the State Highway 1 example, we're putting diversions mostly onto state highways, but there will be a local road impact as well, and so we need to factor that in.
I suppose sometimes people use those local roads as cut-throughs anyway because they don't want to wait at the lights, and so then you've got slower task completion because you've got traffic management plus people cutting through the roads dangerously. Yeah.
So the more we do this, the more we will get good numbers on what the savings are and the impacts are. So that Wellington example, for example, is $154,000. That's a significant saving. What was the cost? And that will be after whatever other considerations we had to pay for.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we're learning as we go with this stuff. Time of use charging. So I mentioned this earlier. The ledge has been drafted at the moment to allow for time of use charging. It's a shame that Stephen Selwell's not here. But no doubt he'll be keeping an eye on this. It doesn't require time of use charging, but what it does is it enables time of use charging for both NZTA and for local authorities. Obviously more relevant for some than others. I can't see me, David, wanting to put time of use charging in a portakey, but It's definitely something that Tauranga City Council will want to have a conversation about, but you never know. But I think the point is the legislation's being generated at the moment, and as much as anything, this is about managing demand to create, faster, more reliable journeys. It's not a new thing internationally, but it's something that we will have to grapple with relatively soon. We're expecting the ledge to be with the select committee towards the end of this year, so it's moving relatively quickly.
David, just pause a moment. Councillor Lees.
Oh, thank you, David. I just wanted to ask, there will presumably be technology enablement of this. So what will be required for the average motor car owner?
There's a whole range of technology options, but obviously not dissimilar to tolling cameras, for example, in order to be able to monitor vehicles, number plate recognition, depending on the model you choose. So in Singapore, for example, you have I think Stephen Silver's talked about this before actually, you have a little device in your car which you charge. You put $100 on it, and as you drive through the network, there are sensors in the network that recognise that that's your car and just deduct your thing. You get a little ping on your cell phone that says you've been charged $8 for driving through this part of town today. If you chose to drive through 3 hours later, you'd be charged $2. That's technology heavy, so we will need to make a sensible investment decision about where you do that. And the obvious places that you would do that are the main highways where you've already got that infrastructure. For example, Auckland, where you've already got gantries, you've already got camera networks, etc. If you were to do that bespoke on a new stretch of highway, you'd have to consider the costs of all of those things. Yeah, and it's not insubstantial, nor is the software that's required to run the whole thing, which is the thing we're investigating at the moment. Okay. National ticketing solutions, I've already talked about this a little bit. Underway, about to, going to be launched, or is being launched as Motu Move. The idea is that you can use contactless debit or credit cards or a Motu Move card anywhere in the country, ultimately, to access any public transport. Starting in Canterbury late this year, Christchurch. So you'll see the first kind of examples. I think there's going to be some more announcements next week on exactly how that's going to be rolled out in Canterbury. The expectations that other regions will start transferring to the system in 2026 once this trial in Canterbury is completed. Speed management, just because this is something we've talked about a fair bit, we are very close to having national land transport rule setting the speed limits. We've talked a lot about the expectations that will come into force around this, but at the moment we continue to use the current rule. To be honest, what we've done is we've just made a decision not to push forward with any other speed limit changes until we've got the new rule. The things I can tell you that are in the new rule are continuation of an expectation that there will be variable speed limits outside schools during the kind of peak period, so 8 to 9:30, 2:30 to 4, and an expectation that those limits will be in place on all schools by the end of 2027. There is an expectation that 30k speed limits in suburban streets will be reversed and they will be replaced with variable speed limits. There is going to be ledge that will enable 110k speed limits across expressways, and an expectation that speed limits that were reductions that were set post 2020 will be reviewed with the reconsideration of economic impact as a key part of that review. And that does impact some pretty significant roads in our network and yours. So we'll be having a much more detailed conversation with each of you as we get closer to that and get some more certainty about what that means. but essentially it's going to require a cost benefit assessment.
David, just pause a moment. There's worship Mayor Daniel.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of devil in the detail that
There
needs
is.
to be unpacked. I mean, we, like other councils, we got zero for LCLR funding. And I think my recollection is that was going to be used to pay for some of the speed limit, variable speed limits outside of schools. So suddenly they're saying we have to do it, we'll do it by 2027, and we're going to take away the funding to do it, which isn't easy. And you talk about reviewing speed limits that were set since 2020. So who is doing that review? And that we consider that the changes we've made have gone through a robust process of consultation, and we tried to take knowing this was coming down the left, we took a very light touch approach to that, and it would be disappointing to have it re-litigated to death just because that's the rules.
So at the moment, those are all proposals that are going through the process. We don't, and they have been considered, and I know there's been a lot of comment back around those proposals. We don't have the final rule yet. Once we have the final rule and we understand which of those proposals have landed and which haven't, we'll obviously be coming to have a conversation about how we implement that and how it impacts on yourselves, but also how you implement those expectations.
It's worship Mayor Moore.
No, I know it's not your problem, but just with a variable speed sign, what is the standard variable speed sign going to look like without some of the electronic work? Like, what's the cost of actually implementing a variable speed sign? Because I just don't know how you physically get someone to go and turn something around like you do at a Marae with Tony. So have you got any idea what they think, what it's going to look like?
Yeah, it will be my problem soon. It depends on, sorry, that's a terrible answer. It depends. It depends on whether there's power at a site or close to a site. And again, as Dennis said, the devil's in the detail. We don't have that detail yet about what that expectation is, but a variable speed sign is electronic. It turns on at 8:30 in the morning and it turns off at 9 or 9:30 or whenever you want. Is there an analog version where somebody could walk out and flip the sign? I don't know. That's an innovation that's worth considering at some of these sites potentially. I don't know if that would provide the surety that the new ledge would require, but potentially. But again, that's until we've got the detail of what's required. I don't know. I know the one at my local school, the principal sits in his office and flicks a switch and it turns on, and flicks a switch and it turns off. So he could easily walk across the road and flip a sign, I suppose. Safety cameras, so just an update. We are starting to take over safety camera operations from New Zealand Police. They should all have transferred by July 2025. With the first lot to transfer, have already transferred actually. And we're doing that over time for obvious reasons. There was an investment of nearly $250 million in the 24-27 NLTP for safety camera move. And we're starting on Stataway 2 between Pokeno and Mangatawhiri in my region, first with a point-to-point camera, which will be very interesting to see how that goes. Other ones that are likely to come in our region over that 3-year period, Stataway 30, Lake Rotomar, Stataway 2, Marata, and Stataway 5, Tumanui, which is just south of Rotorua. So we should be able to provide a little bit more detail about how that will be staged once we have got our head around the NLTP investment.
Could I ask, Chairman, with the camera, particularly at Matatawa, you remove the speed bump if you take out, put a camera there?
Probably not.
There's a lot of damage to my suspension.
Slow down then.
Stop driving your Ferrari over there. Just quickly, because I'm conscious of time, just Bay of Plenty, some of the big things, Tauriko enabling works, so they're well underway. As you will see if you drive past. We started in March. It's probably going to take about 3 years to complete that piece of enabling work. and we are starting the Cambridge Road works this month. So that's Cambridge Road end and Redwood Lane end, and obviously we'll meet in the middle at some point. I'm going to walk through these because we've talked about most of these before. Takatumi North Link. We've had some really key milestones at the three bridges. So Cambridge, Wairoa and Minden roads are finished. You'll now see them tunnelling underneath those bridges. Pretty cool way of doing it, actually. They drill a hole, create the foundation for the bridge, and then they tunnel under it, which is a novel way of approaching it. What that means is that you can shift traffic onto that bridge while you do the work underneath. So the local road network at Moffat and Cambridge Roads and St Andrews Drives are all underway and very near completion. So again, you'll see that, and if you're driving 15th Ave at the moment, you can see the works being built there to complete the connection for the new for the new road. That is also being consulted on around tolling, in the same way that all the other roads are being consulted on.
Could I just ask a question about your tolling consultation for this upgrade?
Yes.
Because I sat next to somebody at breakfast this morning who'd crunched some figures, and his assumption was that if you came off, once you go on to TNL2 at Mokoroa and then TNL1, and you come off at Takatumu Drive, if you go right and go on the Takatumu toll road, you get a third toll. Is that right?
When we do, assuming that a decision's made to toll, because that's not given,
No.
Let's assume that we did, we would review how that tolling system worked so that you would potentially, and I might not say this because I know the team are looking at how that would work, you could potentially have gantries along the section and you'd be tolled once, but if you drove the whole of the network, it would be $4, and if you drove half of it, it would be $2. So you put some smart tolling in.
I think your information that you provide for your consultation is lacking in that respect, because his calculations were that to go from a Mokoroa to Barks Corner would cost you $12.40 return, which and that information sort of gone out around the community. So that's what's hit
So
them
that's the
is, oh my
assumption that
goodness,
you'd be
yeah.
tolled 3 times. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just think that needs to be clarified,
Yeah, okay.
because
I'll
if
ask
there
that.
is going to be some variability in the tolls and some discount, I think people need to know that.
Yeah, I think in the material that was sent out, it says how, we're still working on how the actual cost will be distributed, but clearly it's not clear enough, because that assumption that you'd be told 3 times is not necessary. But yeah, good feedback, thank you. So yeah, on that, obviously Takatumi North Link is one of the 3 highways in the North Island that we're testing tolling proposals for at the moment. I'm not going to dwell on this slide. You guys all know the details there, but for Takatumi, we're proposing 35 years of tolling to cover the maintenance costs for stage 1 and stage 2. And we are proposing, and hopefully this is clear, variable tolling. So time of use charging in real life. And these are the tolling prices that were set. So to put that, I guess, to bed, those are the prices that we've put up. So if you go into a website, that's what you'll see, not $12 something or other, but actually $4.10 if you're a light vehicle at peak time, and not a version 3 times that. But yeah, I'll point that out to the team that that's the way that's been interpreted.
Can I ask Chairman, personally I think road tolling is the way to go inevitably for the future, but it seems that Tauranga is being hit with all the tolls. Like we've got 3 of the country's 4 tolls thereabouts. Are we going to sort of see some balance around the country?
Yes, if I go back to the previous slide. Oh yeah, you'll see in that first bullet point. So we're also talking about Manawatui, Tararua, Otaki, north of Levin are also being proposed. Te Ahua and Turanga are also being proposed for tolling as a leveller, if you like.
David just pauses, worship there, Luca.
Oh, just a comment. I mean, since you're getting most of the investments, it's fair enough that I'd say 3 out of 4 is balanced. I'm just wondering about, I mean, I used to live on the outskirts of Sydney and do the M5, and because I worked on one side of the toll and lived on the other, I was exempted the toll. Because otherwise it would be $7 a day times 5, it's $35 extra just to get to work, which is, you know, it's unaffordable for normal people.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we're planning anything like that?
That level of detail hasn't been worked through yet, but,
Okay.
but to the question before about the technology that's required, you're already on Te Tuma, for example. When I drive a work car, it recognises the number plate and it sends it off to somewhere else, and I don't even worry about whether they have to pay it. So that technology is there now, and yeah, exactly. You would have your registration number in there that says local. Don't ping this person 7 times or 5 times. Last slide, we've already talked about this, Waihi to Mokarava, just for the sake of completion. The board met. Its decision was that having heard all of the options that were put forward to them, and rest assured we put forward a very comprehensive paper that included options ranging from continue as planned with medium barriers with no turnaround facilities, right through to just remove it completely and go with wide centre lines and don't build the roundabouts, and pretty much everything in between, including putting in a few gaps, putting in 3 more turnaround bays, etc. The board's decision was that they saw the value in completing the 2 further roundabouts. Notwithstanding that the purpose of the roundabouts was to provide turnaround facilities when the medium barriers went in, the effect of the roundabouts has also been to slow traffic and moderate traffic volumes. The board considered that completing the further 2 roundabouts made sense and going with wide centre lines, and maintaining all right turning movements, with the exception of Wrights Road. The board considered that they did not want to be in the situation of removing centre-line barriers for better or worse. So that was the decision, and that is what we're implementing at the moment. So you'll see the completion of those roundabouts occurring as we speak. Mr. Chair, that is presentation.
Get the questions. Any further questions or comments, colleagues? Oh, Honourable Ken Shirley, then his worship, flooding in. Yeah.
Slide 1, page 37 of the diligent.
Your mic on.
And this is the old Coach Road junction improvements at Otamaraka, and it's related to what we've just discussed. And it says there that 2 barriers were built in 2 sections, those wire barriers, with a gap between to enable vehicles turning right in and out of access to the Otamaraka on the right. I was just wondering about consistency in that I would have thought the traffic movements on Wrights Road were considerably greater than that. And in that instance, a feature was made that you've got to provide for right-hand turn for functionality, and yet that's what we didn't see at the Katikati to Omokaroa. So I guess my question is, what's the criteria of traffic movements that triggers a right-hand turn when wire barriers have been installed, continuous wire barriers?
So there isn't a single trigger. It's a broader assessment of risk. So, if there are 10 cars or 100 cars once every 3 months, versus thousands of movements every day or hundreds of movements every day, it's quite a different scenario. So there is no one rule fits all. In this case, the board's decision was simply that they didn't support the idea of removing barrier that we had already constructed, but accepted that the inconvenience at Wrights Road was relatively minor in terms of turn left. It's a very short distance to the roundabout and back around relative to what would have been the case, for example, for Work Road or Lund Road or any of those other roads, and so they didn't feel that it was a compelling case to go through the cost and remove the existing barrier.
We should be in, yeah.
Just a quick one, it says in the paper that the estimated completion date for Takitimu North 1 is 2028, is that slipped? I thought it was 2027.
Yeah, it is, and I think I indicated that at a previous meeting that there'd been some slippage in terms of timeframes. You'll recall we had a horror year, the anniversary weekend floods, etc., and that put us back reasonably significantly on that project. They have done a great job of catching up, but there were some pretty critical milestones in there that didn't get met as a consequence of literally having their machinery underwater for a period of time.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, Luca.
You didn't mention ruck, did you?
No.
No. And maybe this isn't the place to have the conversation, but it seems to me that a conversation is warranted ever since I started paying ruck on an electric vehicle. Methodology for determining the ruck and all of that. Is this something we could have another time, or
Just keep going.
well, it seems to me when I apply the methodology that I read about here, with, you know, using this rule of thumb, power to 4, that normal passenger vehicles road damage, using that rule of thumb that comes from a 1950s US study, is doing negligible road damage compared to a logging truck, or Ken Shirley will be more right onto this. And when you do the calcs, a logging truck should be paying a hell of a lot more than it is, using that simple rule of thumb, which is being debated, but nobody's redoing the studies as far as I can tell. So where are we going to land with all this? Because what is fair? I mean, an electric car it gets whacked with ruck, but it's not doing the damage up there that a normal ICE car is doing. And we're supposed to be encouraging it. And yet what we've done is killed the EV market. Essentially, in this country, we're stalled at what, 1.6% of the total vehicle fleet. The very thing we should be encouraging, you would have thought. But the ruck thing is, I think it needs a good hard look at.
So those are all good questions to have at a political level.
Well, there is a science level to it, and I don't think that's right either.
Yeah, look, and I think the question, you're quite right.
Because actually, it's a science question first, and the political question second.
Well, I think they go hand in hand. I think they have to go
Yeah,
hand
all right,
in hand.
whatever.
So yeah, I agree with you. There is absolutely work required and happening in terms of how best to use road user charges in a way that is fair but simple. Because if you could make the case for 20 different classes of road user charges, or you could make the case for saying let's keep it simple and have 3 or 4. But to your point, absolutely, there's an acknowledgement that a logging truck does substantially more damage to a road than your electric vehicle. There is also an acknowledgement that private vehicle is being used for private transport, and a truck is moving freight and enabling the economy to a greater extent potentially than the private vehicle. There are a whole lot of other considerations that go in there, and they are not my considerations. They
I
all
know.
need to
I
go
mean, I
in
can
the mix.
impale you there, but I won't. But okay, let's have
So those are
a
the
proper
things that need to go in the
conversation
mix.
about this, because I don't think we're doing things right.
Yep, and this is definitely a Ministry for the Environment conversation, and Ministry for Transport conversation, and that I invite you to engage them on.
Going to move receipt of your report, David.
Yes, please.
Seconded, our worship there too. Now, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Andrew, item 7.4, finding a replacement for councillor Crowther.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this paper is essentially a byproduct of the Tauranga City Council election. which has impacts on the makeup of this committee. The two key resolutions of the paper, which I'll take as read. Firstly, notes the appointment of Mayor Drysdale as the primary member and Deputy Mayor Schuler as the alternate member. And secondly, appoints a selection panel being the RTC Chair and Director of Public Transport to appoint a new sustainability advisor with the departure of now Councillor Ben Crowther as a TCC councillor. That's
all good. It's been moved by His Worship Mayor Denyer, second Honourable Ken Sherwood. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Moving over, Andrew again. Oh no, the units, we've done that. Regional Land Transport Plan Implementation Report. Andrew and Dale, who I believe is on Zoom but is not well. So Dale, if you want to drop off and leave it to Andrew entirely. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Dale is online and feeling much better, but let me know, Dale, if that's not the case. But if you are okay and you're there, I'll let you go ahead. But if you aren't there, I will jump in.
He's not there. He is there. What's the state of health, Dale? You're going to kick off, Andrew.
Okay, sure. I'm not sure where Dale is there, obviously, but so essentially this paper is a review of the RLTP and its implementation. So it's of the previous RLTP document. So it looks at the program of work that was provided within that document, and the paper basically goes through and highlights what has occurred, what hasn't occurred, and reasons for that. So that the appendix is largely where the meat of the paper is. So there's some commentary against each of the line items, and I will note that this appendix in this paper is one supported by staff at all TLAs and Waka Kotahi. So the commentary in there is a combination of collaboration across the regional transport sector and those staff. So there might be comments in there that you might want to take back to your staff, but I'll take the paper is largely read, but yeah, I guess noting that in 6 months' time, we will move to a new version of this, which reflects the current RLTP, and this closes the loop on the previous one. Let's take any questions.
Questions to Andrew? I'll move. His Worship Mayor Luke, are you happy to second? Reluctantly. I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. A verbal update from members of the committee. Inspector Marsh, can you give us verbal update on what's going on with the constabulary at the moment?
Constabulary? Yeah, year to date so far we have had 19 fatal accidents. Sadly, 2 of them have occurred this week. So we're conscious that things can change quickly. Our teams are working hard to curb these numbers as best they can. Of note, 7 of those incidents, the driver is suspected to be under the influence of alcohol, which is disappointing, obviously. 11 of the incidents, cause was known to be suspected to be excess speed, which is again disappointing. And 14 of those fatal crashes have occurred where the speed limit of the road was 80k or above. Geographically, the crashes have occurred across all of your areas in a pretty resolute way. In the prevention space, year ending June, our staff conducted 291,000 breast screening tests across the Bay of Plenty, which was their biggest year ever. We've also sadly had to issue 32,000 speeding tickets. And disappointingly, we found 6,700 people still not wearing their seatbelts. As I said, the last 12 months have been our lowest road toll in 5 years. And coincidentally, it's our highest number of enforcement across the district as well. In the prevention education space, we have some of our road policing staff assigned to working on the Right Track program, which sees a group of about 15 people who have appeared before the court previously on driving matters and are keen to get themselves back on track, hence the name. sees them attend an 8-week course of some pretty hard-hitting classes and practical exercises in the hope that they will change their life around, or turn their life around, sorry. The course has been operating across the country for a number of years, and currently sits at a pretty much astounding success rate of 80% of the course members that attend don't appear before a judge again, which is outstanding, obviously. We're halfway through our second course at the moment, based in Tauranga, and we're looking to extend that through your other areas as we move through the year into next year. The results obviously are great, and there's huge potential there for us, and it's nice to be involved in something that's positive for some of our staff. Coming up for us, conscious of Oliver's comments earlier around the road safety promotion program funding, but Waiapini Police are excited to be working on or starting to work on the Better Together road safety initiative, which is set to operate in the Waiapini starting next month into November, hopefully with all of your teams involved. The Waiapini, along with 3 other districts across the country, have been selected to take part in the initiative. The initiative seeks to bring together all of the local councils, NZTA and New Zealand Police, and we look to work collaboratively together on a specific road safety issue in our region. The issue that we're going to focus on, but not solely, will be drinking and driving, for obvious reasons. I think our last 2 checkpoints here in the Western Bay of Plenty saw 1 in 65 cars have a drunk driver driving it, which is horrendous. You think how quickly it takes to get 65 cars down Hewlett's Road. It's the blink of an eye. So we're going to try to do our best to curb that, obviously. The initiative itself has been run twice in the last 12 months across 3 districts in New Zealand, which has successfully seen the targeting of these offences that are causing our people harm. We've been pushing for nearly 12 months to get the initiative into our district, so we're really keen to see it succeed and keen to have your help. Our hope is that we can work together to encourage people not to drink. This will be done through combined marketing, communication and education efforts, and it'll be followed by a month of enforcement, which we think is going to work really well, because it'll be the month of November, which will then set us up to go through that summer period when we've got everyone having a few beers after a work do type situation. So local marketing, communications and education will be used to encourage the people not to drink and drive, and there'll be that increased enforcement through that November period. So the overall objective will be to reduce the number of deaths and serious injuries across the Bay of Plenty. And as I say, we hope that everyone's going to jump on board. I know communication's been sent out to everyone's comms centres in the last week. And the first of the meetings that NZTA will be holding for us, or cheering for us, will be Monday. So I know we've received 1 negative reply not to be involved, but we're keen for everyone to at least come to that first meeting to see what it all looks like, and we'll jump on board and make a big difference. So it's us. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thanks for that. The Back on Track program for recidivist offenders, how does that work? Is that referral from the courts, or is it voluntary? Is it a boot camp? How does it work?
It's the right track. Yep. It's offenders that have appeared before the court, offenders, drivers. So they've been caught by us. The one we have running at the moment, and the one we've just previously done, it ranges from 17-year-old kids that have been done for the first time through to recidivist offenders with 10, 15 offences for drink driving. But there's great wine, so the judges run by the Chief Judge Paul Gagan, and all the community magistrates come along and they jump in. It's not a boot camp, they do 1 day of practical exercises, but they literally have one of the lectures they have, or talks they have, is a woman that speaks for a couple of hours about how she's lost 3 of her children to separate drunk driving accidents. So it's pretty hard hitting, and the feedback and the comments we get back from, they all have to come with a support helper, their parents or their fathers or whatever. If they miss one, they're out. So the previous one we saw, we had a guy come across from Pataru every day, his boss drove him across personally every day, and the feedback's outstanding. So we're real keen to do it.
If they miss one, though, is there a consequence that some people would want to get out, so they just miss one?
The consequences,
is there fines and things.
The consequences, they still have to stand in front of the judge or the magistrate later, and there's no tie-in that they're going to get a lesser sentence, but it obviously helps. Like what Paul Gagan said, because they all have to speak at the end of it. And you've got these kids that hate the police, hate some of them, and it's just been very positive. It's and I think we lost 2 out of the 15 on the first one. The rest of them have been really great, so we're keen to get involved. I think it's a great thing, and we'll try and push it out through the other areas as well.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak in support of the Better Together program. Just really important. There's very few occasions that we get to pool our resources on something like this. So, notwithstanding the news from the NLTP in terms of road safety, I think that probably behoves us to be more cognizant of using these kind of opportunities to collectively put a message out. And the stats are scary. I get all the accident reports. Won't miss that. It's staggering how many of them are a consequence of drugs or alcohol, and I think the more we can do in that space, and Bay of Plenty's not well represented in those stats, so the more we can do in that space, the better. So just really encourage you to think about that really hard. Have a chat with your teams when you get back.
Stacey, Automobile Association.
Thank you. It's consultation season for us at the moment. I think we've got 4 that we're working on with our meeting on Monday. So we've got boy race legislation, medical fitness to drive, which is the older replacement driver license for older drivers. I've got a paper on vertical deflection devices, speed humps. Which was a hotly debated.
In the context of old people.
No, totally separate topics, I promise. Yeah. And of course, tolling, which I've got a meeting with our policy and advocacy team after this on. So that's our big piece. In my AA Research Foundation trustee role, we just launched our driver licensing research that was on the graduated driver licensing system. So a review of other systems around the world and how they might be applied to the New Zealand driver license training system, and we're looking at how we can tie that into a previous piece of work we did in 2017, which was on youth traffic offending, which is particularly relevant in areas where there is a real lack of alternative options for people to drive, and it's normally young offenders' first introduction to the justice system as a traffic offender. So that's some important pieces there. And then I've just signed off a new piece of work, which is going to be with WSP. Fergus Tate is actually overseeing that. If anyone's dealt with him in the past, that's going to be on making work sites safer and more efficient. So particularly topical with some of the things we were talking about today with work sites that can't be closed or diverted, how they can be made more efficient and easier for drivers to understand.
Stacey. Angus, are you there somewhere hidden with the camera off?
Kia ora. Can you hear me?
You can.
Hello. Hi. Nice to see you. Well, I have a very
give us some good news from Kiwi Road.
Well, only a very brief update from me today. So, first of all, just congratulations to Councillor Crowther. I'm also enjoying that reference. Well done in your election. And thanks as well to David Spears. I think this might be your last RTC meeting before you head over to my favourite and home district of Hauraki District Council. So just acknowledging David. Look, in terms of a couple of the discussion points raised today, I'm just going to speak to 2. So time of use charging, just as a nice gentle reminder, good news to your point, Chair Thurston, there is always an alternative to road users who are stuck in congestion, particularly if they're on a big truck, and that is the rail freight network. So for anyone doing modelling around potential time of use charging in Tauranga, don't forget about the fact that there is an alternative mode that could mop up some of that price sensitive freight. Second point is in relation to the the request there for the Ministry of Transport to provide updates around RUC pricing. I'm just making the point that I'd wholeheartedly endorse that. The Ministry did release just last year their it's called the DTCC report. It's always an acronym when it comes to transport, which is around domestic transport charges and costs. And that focused on every vehicle weight class when it comes to RUC and also all other transport users, including rail. And the heaviest trucks do not pay 100% of the wear and tear impact of the road. That matters because trucks consume the road asset. Cars consume space on the road. So it is a legitimate point to be focusing on. And from a rail perspective, we always hark on about this because you want to have a good equivalent competition point to be having. So I'm sure the Ministry, if they can't provide an update around the work that they're currently doing around future revenue settings, can certainly provide an update around the work that they have done and published last year. The final point I wanted to make is that we don't currently have a published rail network investment program, which outlines all of our activities for this year, next year, and the year after that. That's deliberate. The Minister of Transport is doing a network economics exercise, which we wholeheartedly welcome. That's not expected to be finished until the end of this calendar year, upon which the Minister will have the information he needs to take a decision and approve, and therefore publish the ARNIP. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because normally by now we would have given the RTC a comprehensive update about what's sitting in our work bank. Can't do that until it's published, so I'm just flagging that we're really keen to do that, but it'll be early next year. And that was all from me.
Angus, any questions, anybody for Kiwi Rail? Well, we have them with us. Being none, well, we're on the home straight here, and David, this is your last meeting. And it falls to me to thank you most sincerely on behalf of the members. You've been an outstanding representative for your organisation. You've been very friendly, engaging, affable, and incredibly knowledgeable. So we're not in the habit of making gifts or quotas in this organisation, but we broke the rules today, so at huge expense to the organisation. I'll ask my bridesmaid on my left if you would like to. You're going to get an umbrella for a start, which can become a talking stick in Novaki. And we're going to plant, Amanda.
A baby manuka.
A baby manuka. So you plant. And what's the other thing? Oh, so a coffee mug. So let's. Thank you to Amanda also. But we have broken all the rules, giving out gifts, I can assure you. So floor's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's really nice, and I've got a lifestyle block to plant that on. So thank you. Look, can I just say to each and every one of you, thank you, because it's no small thing. 3.5 years coming into this committee, 3.5 years ago, knowing nothing about transport. But being welcomed as a proper member of the committee and showing the respect that goes with that, I've really appreciated that, and I've actually really enjoyed the questions and the debates and again the level of engagement that my team and I have had with your teams has been awesome. They're very professional people. Part of the reason that I've chosen to go back to local government from central government is the interactions that I've had with your teams in this role, and that's sort of convinced me that that's the place that I really want to be in for the remainder of my career. So, truly thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Floor's open if anyone would like to say something. Mayor Luke, road user charges. have another switch.
Actually, you're right, it's on the top of my list of 10 things. Road user charges. Yeah, do you think we could get some expert in here to give us a bit of a spiel on road user charges, and then maybe, depending on whatever the outcome of the debate is, do some joint advocacy, which might be a bit more powerful than just Mayor Luca writing to yet another politician who's going to ignore me.
So, David, can you suggest some names to Amanda for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, it's the ministry, is it?
What we might do is see if we can get somebody to come online from the ministry.
Sure.
But I'll have a chat with the investment team at work and get somebody for your next. When's your next meeting? November.
So my replacement will be here for that, but I'll see what we can do, because I think, yeah, it's a bit.
Angus, have you got any thoughts on any appropriate people that you can think of that we should approach, or ministry, or?
Definitely the Ministry of Transport. I mean, they are the experts on this, and they have a fantastic economics team. So yes, I agree with David.
Tim, this is very well covered on the website of the Ministry of Transport. The whole logic, history, analysis, basis, the power of the 4 of VNAV rules, analysis, it's all on the Ministry of Transport's web, and NZTR log it too.
Yeah, I mean, I've snooped around a bit, but maybe others haven't. And anyway, I think that if the conversation is considered not to be worthwhile,
What I'll do, Mr. Chair, is work with you to get an invitation to somebody. No problem. Can I just add while I'm speaking to Jane's question? I've emailed the team around tolling, and they are going to make those changes.
On the sustainability officer, can it be an elected member as well, or does it have to be somebody from outside?
Damush, do you want to join us on this discussion? Take a seat next to David. Just take a seat next to David.
Through the chair, councillors, mayors, Namuta Potasi, General Manager, Strategy and Science. So the question was in relation to, can the sustainability advisor be a councillor? It was always anticipated that the advisors for this committee would be able to provide impartial advice to this committee, and we've got a number of different advisors. It was not intended that that advisor would come from a local government. It was intended that they would be independent, would be providing you with all independent advice. That was the initial intent of the advisors.
I'm over to the dark side now, Glenn, so you're tainted, all right?
So that means I can't nominate Glenn.
Chairman, I don't know that's precluded. I totally agree, but the statute makes it quite clear you've got to have 2 regional council representatives and the various territorial authority representatives, and the rest are non-voting advisors, and they're not prescribed. And there was clarification with correspondence on this that a council can have advisors, many as it likes in essence, but that doesn't preclude a council being covering the other role as well, as I see it.
Oh, that sounds good, but
would you like us to seek some guidance on this?
I think so, yeah,
okay.
Because
it
would be a shame to lose. That is assuming.
Through the chair, we can double check with governance and look back as appropriate.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for that. And just finally on the RL.
You've had a few wins today, you wish.
Yeah, I mean, I can shut up now if you want. But on the RLTP, I'm a new mayor, and this is the first time I've been involved in it. I guess I've got to say I didn't find it a very satisfying experience, actually. I mean, your chairing is excellent, and it's really nice to be in the same room with everybody. That's all great. We got around a room. We could have started with the template of the previous one, fiddled around with a few words, adjusted it for the, government policy statement and all the rest of it. Then we came up with this list, which went through some sort of methodology and multi-criterion analysis, which is itself fairly subjective. But anyway, all of our respective transport managers got involved in that, and a number was spat out by the system. A list was compiled. I don't know how many it had on it, 100 and something. We had 8. At the end of the day, nobody got what they wanted, probably. But we got 0 out of whatever's on the bottom line, which comes to 0. So the issue of fairness I raised, and it was sort of discounted as a nonsense. I sort of wonder if we can't do it a bit. I even questioned why bother coming. I mean, at the end of it, it was sort of like throw some cards on the ground, and what we did get in minute amount of funding for was third down on our list. So obviously the the scoring system wasn't really taken much notice of. So I don't really understand what happened. I mean, the process was relatively, there were hiccups inside this committee as well, as to what got on the list and all the rest of it. And then what happens when it goes away from here, it's like a lottery sort of thing, almost. So that's my, just to being open and honest, feeling for how it rolled. And I asked the question about whether or not we couldn't do things better or maybe even a more streamlined way. Given that, there's nothing new under the sun really. I mean, it's a slight change of emphasis from one to another, from one RLTP to another. And then what's happened in that space between the RLTP that we delivered and then the actual investment decisions, which I guess are complex and convoluted, but we are, after all creatures of statute here. We've got no real power, but this was an advocacy document that we really put up there. So I don't know. I mean, I thought I'd throw that out there.
I just start as a worship in Rotorua on the Zoom still. Oh, there, your worship. You can join this conversation with us. It's common knowledge there's been huge anxiety in Rotorua, particularly expressed by the Chamber of Commerce in Rotorua NZ. Exactly the things that you've raised. And so what we're doing on the early in February, and her worship is hosting it, and she's asked me to chair it, is that we're bringing interested parties together, particularly the Chamber and Rotorua NZ, and politicians like Councillor O'Brien and others. And our staff are going to do a presentation. I stopped short of calling it a post-mortem, but it's basically what happened, what were we charged to do, what could have been done better, what do we need to do next time. It's going to be incredibly positive. So would you like, I make the offer here and now, would you like us to do a similar one in Whakatane?
Why not?
You could send out the invitations and invite the Chamber and different ones who, I can guarantee people have expressed their displeasure and upset and hurt to you about why we didn't fare better in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. So you know the individuals that you'd like to invite, but I make that offer, Your Worship.
I haven't copped a lot of flack yet, but that's because we're still trying to digest what actually happened. I get there's a certain amount of shell shock there.
Indeed. But no, we make that offer, but we're having the one that Her Worship's hosting is early in October in Rotorua, and it'll be round table and incredibly positive. But if you'd like us, I'll ask Amanda to pick up on that and deal with your office if you wish.
That'd be great.
All good. Okay. Honourable Ken Shearer.
I think it's a very important point that Mayor Luca raises, because I think you may not have been in the meeting we had in Rotorua where we're doing the deliberations. I think we're all in shock about it was a systems failure, and it was a lack of understanding, because the whole Land Transport Act and the way regional transport plans are put together is very prescribed procedures and steps. And what became clear right at the last stages of deliberations was that many of the councils, particularly the smaller councils who don't have the same depth of staff and capacity necessarily, like Tauranga City obviously has a big transport component and the regional council does, but there were critical steps, and it seemed that some of the smaller districts, and actually not so much small, even Rotorua, didn't appreciate that you had to put up all projects, including what were state highway projects, and that the Regional Transport Committee and deliberations had to rate them all as a total package. And there was a staff committee, I forget its name, which actually met technical advisory group, and they did all the spade work. But it became very clear that Rotorua, Whakatane, and others were not engaged at the same level in that critical step of bringing together all of those projects, so that the decisions that we made in the final deliberation, a whole lot have been truncated. And I've actually said in this organisation, I think we need to spend some time as a regional council with all of our component councils, we're all part of the same family, so that we all have a clear understanding of what the steps of that process are, because you're absolutely right, the outcome is quite unbalanced.
Yeah, and I think that Glenn in his submission pointed out what most of us could have got through the list really was that, you know, like for the Eastern Bay got 1% of funding in the first 3 years, representing 16% of the population. So, I mean, that issue of how you distribute things, for me, it was an eye-opener as to how this whole narrative about regionalisation actually works, because what happens is that the little fries get stomped on, essentially, well, you know, in a figurative sense, and the money, the big bucks, what little of it there is, which is why I asked the question about whether 32 billion is a lot of money or a little bit of money. It sounds like a trivial question, but it's not. And if parts of people can't even give me the answer as to whether that in real terms is really an increase, then there's something seriously wrong somewhere. So I just think that there's an opportunity to have a rethink and reset, maybe.
Your Worship, Mayor Taxel, followed by Councillor Lees. Your Worship.
Thank you, and I'll just add to the discussion that's already been had, that I think there was also a lack of understanding about the historical commitments that had also been made. So years and years ago, the Rotorua Lakes Council had lifted the designation for the Eastern Arterial route as an example. And there was an expectation that we did that because we were going to be receiving investment, and that investment has never come. So I think, you know, there were a lot of us that were in the region that were shell-shocked to not receive this funding. So while we will continue discussions, obviously we can't change what's already happened in this previous plan, but I think at some stage we do also need to start bringing in our own electorate MPs, because so far the conversation has been directly to ministers, but if this is ultimately a decision of a government agency, then I believe we should also be involving our government decision makers, because yes, when our communities come to us and ask us why we did not receive the investment, also ultimately we should have our own electorate MPs advocating for our areas, their areas as well. And now, apologies, I do need to leave for another local meeting, so I'll leave you guys to it. And thank you, Councillor O'Brien, who's there for us still from Rotorua. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Lees.
Well, thank you. I'm talking as a past Regional Transport Committee Chair, and I think there must have been a change in the process of the way that the state highway projects were entered into the Regional Land Transport Plan, because when I was a chairperson, I can remember it was only the NZTA that was able to put in projects, state highway projects, into the Regional Land Transport Plan. It was about the road controlling authorities that had the control over their particular roads were the ones that could enter it into the list for prioritisation. And I can remember a lot of discussion and lobbying going on from the TLAs to try and convince NZTA to put the state highway projects into the SHIP, or whatever it was called back then. So I do think there has been a slight shift in the process, and I'm not sure when it happened and why it happened, but I was actually quite surprised when I heard that the reason why the state highway projects across the region weren't in the RLTP was because the TLAs didn't put them in, because that was not the way it was done back when I was a Regional Transport Committee Chair. So just saying.
Honourable Ken Shirley, then Councillor.
There is a classic example of this, actually goes back to, I think there's a 2016 plan where the then Western Bay District Council did not put in stage 2 of Takitimu North on that same logic. They thought, well, we don't need to, because that's what the government does, that this is part of the state program. But then the incoming Minister, Michael Woods, the Minister of Transport, actually said that he specifically said he was taking that money to build the cycleway across the Auckland Harbour, and was sort of gloating that that's where the money was coming from, using that very example. And he says, because the locals don't want it. That was in his press release. I've still got a copy of it. That was, of course, of nonsense. The National Land Transport Plan doesn't work like that at all. But that was the argument that was used because the locals didn't put it in. You're not having the funding. And that is a good example of back then even you had to put in the state highway programs as part of the overall regional plan.
I'd like to say you had to lobby to get it in, and if NZTA didn't want it in, it didn't go in. And I can remember putting sections in the ROTP to say these are not included in the program, but we want them to be included in the program. So that did happen a number of times.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I should probably, with my Tauranga City Councillor hat on, say how wonderful it is we got all the majority of the projects in there and the funding. But I guess my concern is still the same, that just the equity issue. And I'm wondering if staff somehow can carve out the time, if the committee thinks it's appropriate, to just look at briefly the, say, Canterbury, Hawke's Bay, some of those other regional land transport plans, and just try to get a sense of whether they actually take that into consideration more when they put projects forward, and also the flip side of it, of what's actually funded, whether it makes any difference in terms of whether a project is ranked at number 34 or number 26 or whatever it is. Because having watched this play out over the last, or probably I've watched it over 3 RLTPs quite closely, it seems that it makes a difference, but I don't know if there's any evidence to sort of track whether, as Mayor Luca has kind of said, whether it actually, you could actually not even participate and whether you get a very similar result, apart from getting the projects in the first place. In other words, is that prioritisation process critical, and do other councils take a different approach to it, to what plenty?
Any final comments before I hand over to David to wrap it up? Mayor Luca.
I mean, just a specific one as an example of the relative arbitrariness of really what happens is that we had 8 projects. One was scored at 13, one was scored at, ended up at 13. There was a bit of juggling that went on. One at 15 and the rest were below that. We were told at the outset that if it wasn't in the top 20, then it probably wouldn't get anywhere. So we got a smidgen of funding for a so-called Western Link that's contingent on another project being done. And somehow the third thing on the list gets funded. Now, nobody came and circled back and said, we'll fund this one, but we won't fund your top one. So why the hell go through the process if in the end, there's just somebody with an arbitrary hand is going to go through and say this and doesn't even realise what's going on in the local context. And you know, that funding might not even be useful or whatever. So there's that sort of coming back process which never happens, and the arbitrariness of the prioritised list, which is, yeah.
So, Oliver, you missed the discussion, but we're going to replicate the Rotorua Roundtable in the Eastern Bay of Plenty in Whakatane, and Amanda, and you can work on some dates with the Mayor's Chambers. Final comments, David.
I think there is a great deal of value in you going through the process of reviewing the RLTP and having staff set out for you almost a process chart or a pro map or something. You know, these are the steps and this is what each step means. It is quite statutorily dictated, and it is not a simple process. It's far more complicated than it probably needs to be, but such is life. So I think there's a real value in that. I will say, just in terms of the investment decisions that finally get made, this round was incredibly awkward, and I'll speak for the staff on this because I know, you know, how they felt, because we didn't have a GPS. The GPS dramatically changed many of the assumptions that were made at the start of the regional transport plan. And to your point, Mayor Luca, about taking the old one and starting there, this GPS is very different from the GPS we had when we had the last one. So we would have ended up in a very different place. What the GPS does and what the government does is gives our board activity classes. So there's, 10, 11 activity classes, from road safety to state highway maintenance to, last time there was coastal shipping, this time there isn't. Each of those activity classes has an upper and a lower limit of investment that our board must adhere to. The discretion our board has is where between that upper and lower limit they decide to make that investment. And that is the bit that the regional transport plan helps dictate. Up until that point, our board have no discretion. So they get given 10 activity classes, they get given an upper limit and a lower limit, and then they get given a number, 32.9 billion in this case. That 32.9 billion is not enough to fund every activity class at the top of the limit. It's enough to fund every activity class at the bottom limit, and then some discretion across other activity classes. So the decision the board have to make is, if we start every activity class at its lower limit, which ones, with guidance from the GPS and the regional transport plan and the state highway improvement plan, which ones do we want to give more money to than the minimum? That's where the prioritisation in the regional transport plan and the state highway improvement plan come in. But that's the perversity of why your number one might have been a cycling project and your number 4 might have been a state highway, a local road rehabilitation project or a public transport project. The actual number 1 to 12 doesn't matter, because if number 12 is the highest priority state local road investment project, and the board decide that they want to invest a lot in local road maintenance, which is what has happened, number 12 will get funded, and number 1, the safety project, in this case the board have gone for the minimum, number 1 won't get funded. By way of a very close example, in the Waikato Regional Transport Plan, the number 1 priority was Bully Point, which is Taupo West Taupo, East Taupo, East Taupo. There were 2 Bully Point priorities. One was the long-term bypass of Bully Point and between Taupo and Turangi, and one was short-term fix. They both got funded, but they got funded because the investment in state highways is at or near the top of the funding limit. Number 3 was a Coromandel project, which everybody thought was a really high priority, but it didn't get funded because the activity class didn't have enough money to fund all of the asks across the whole country. And when that one was stacked up against the whole country, and it was a state highway project, so it was one of ours, it didn't get funded, even though locally it was our 3rd highest priority. It just didn't stack up across the whole country with the amount that was available at that lower limit of the activity class. That's the bit that I don't think we did a great job of articulating through our partners, and I'll take that on board myself. Probably I didn't do a great job of articulating that here either. But that's the bit that the GPS has a massive influence on, and unfortunately this time, we were 3/4 of the way through our process. In fact, we were nearly 4/4 of the way through our process before we got that GPS. And so what that meant was, and to Rotorua's point, and this is something I'm going to that meeting that I will speak to, if those projects had been in there, probably they wouldn't have got funded. In fact, almost certainly they wouldn't have got funded. Because of the decisions that were made in terms of where those upper and lower limits are and the demands across the whole of the country. So it's a bit of a dark art, but I think we can shed some light on that dark art by going through that process. And Oliver's nodding, so I'm feeling confident that he knows more about it than I do. So yeah, I think it's well worth doing that with the committee.
I totally accept that the GPS was very late in coming and a lot of it being done. But anyway, I just think that maybe things can be done a bit better.
And I think
that's right. I might as well have been here, actually. I mean, the RAG group does its thing. You get your list and it goes through the methodology, and then that's it. I don't know. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for the cordial.
What's your last name? NZTA.
I'm
trying to work out the Eastern Bay.
That's the 18th of October.
18th of October.
But please don't book anything on the
No,
18th.
no. But I know you're coming in the flesh to Rotorua, but even if you came in by Zoom,
Yeah,
Eastern
absolutely.
Bay, we'll get a date for the 18th of.
Oh, look, if I can be there in the flesh, I will.
Okay, final comments, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. I think just for the staff perspective as well, and I appreciate the comments that have been made today and agree with David, it's with a dark art. We are guided by legislation and also by guidelines that are agreed nationally. So the process we went through was a national process that was the same as every other region. So
I don't know, I was just waving to Lion.
Sorry.
I'm trying to
ignore you now.
Pointing over there.
Sorry.
apologies, but yeah, so I think the process that we followed, we felt like it was a robust one, but I do understand where you're coming from because it is an awkward balancing act, and ultimately the decision comes down to the funders. And we felt like we did as good a shot as we could have, considering the circumstances, but I think having that corridor at the Eastern Bay and at Rotorua and probably bringing some more of these questions to the table with the likes of David there will be our opportunity to sort of dig into a bit more of that, so yeah.
Thank you.
I'll look just through the chair and completely support reviewing what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it before we figure out how. I can appreciate that there have been some processes that have been followed or conducted in the past that may have changed. So fully endorse getting together. Let's simply have a look because we do this once every training, and if you do it not so flash in your training, that's your one shot possibly, depending on outcome of some local body elections. So look, we're big enough in ourselves to be able to say we can do better. Let's review what it is. We did have some timing differences in terms of GPS, but I also wonder that there's an opportunity to actually create, chair, potentially local plans that then lift to a regional level that can be better guided once GPS or government priorities have been confirmed. We're trying to fly into a Bay of Plenty-wide conversation, whereas actually we could do some local work first. Governments will make decisions depending on what is appealing for that particular government at a particular time, but the content should actually be from the ground up. Then you lift into the regional setting and you get some confirmation in terms of GPS direction, and then you can simply agree at that point, this is going to give us our high level of success. Thank you, Chair.
We should head in. Do you want one in the Western Bay?
Yeah, I perhaps just ask if
I don't know. I don't want you to feel you've been.
No, I don't feel that the process itself was, or certainly my council did a satisfactory job in getting projects on there, but my impression is that rightly or wrongly, the central government decided it was going to spend most of the money on state highways, and therefore their NZTO projects, and so what local government put up was largely irrelevant. I mean, we put a long list of projects, and if they don't want to fund local government, they don't want to fund local government. That's the way it was.
Oliver, I sense the last word is yours.
It's very graceful of you, Chair. I just want to reflect from an officer perspective, as Andrew already has. We acknowledge that there are challenges with the current system, and I think every regional council is aligned with us in terms of the challenges that we face. But I think the encouraging thing is that there is potentially sound of some sort of reform or review in this space to look at providing more certainty when it comes to transport investments. So at an officer level, through the various forums that we have, we are looking to support that work, and we'll keep you updated as to how those things progress.
I will close the meeting at 12:20 and invite you to share an lavish lunch provided for David's farewell. So you didn't just get an umbrella. So